Sacre bleu. There you go. I think, by the mighty power of Jesus, I'm back. Good God, YouTube. So goddamn petty, YouTube. Do my goddamn head in. Man. YouTube sucks. YouTube sucks. Goddamn, man. I think it was the devil's work in YouTube then that we got a violation, guys. Taffy violating somebody. You would never heard of it. Violation. Anyways, I hope you can hear me. I hope I'm back. Yeah. Like I said, I'm going to open up the panel for the second half. Chuck that in there. Pin it up there. So I'm getting good at this shit now, boys. I'm getting good, and girls, I'm getting good at this shit. So if you want to jump on, guys, you're more than welcome to. Any demons, anybody possessed by demons particularly, please jump on. Maybe somebody would like the deliverance to be delivered. Not by a DHL van, not by an Amazon van, but I mean delivered. By the holy power of the Tafster. We can get you healed up today. On the Tafter show. We can cast out them demons with the holy power of Jesus. You feel the power. So, Oh Maria, Sister Act will get the channel a violation strike. Noted. So, there was something else I wanted to tell you guys. There's a book, an old book, and it's called Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost. And this is basically the this is it summarized. Okay, it's a audio book of nearly 10 hours worth long. It's 10 hours long. One of the greatest audio books out there. Like, yeah, but it's Paradise Lost. So I'm gonna share the screen if nobody want to come up just yet. Share this.
Satan, right? There's this weird modern image of Lucifer as this kind of misunderstood anti-hero. A handsome, chain-smoking bad boy with fiery wings, daddy issues, and a 16-pack that could cut glass. This is often justified with the explanation that Lucifer Morningstar was a solid 10, and when he fell from heaven he retained his good looks and charm. But the seductive bad boy persona is actually not his traditional representation. Medieval manuscripts paint Satan as less of a prince of darkness and more like the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now, both interpretations have literary merit. Sexy Satan has the benefit of being someone you could see yourself selling your soul to, while ugly Satan makes makes more sense conceptually, since if he was going to be spending eternity trying to seduce humanity to the dark side, it would make sense for God to not make it unnecessarily easy on him by making him not so easy on the eyes. So the question remains, where did the idea of sexy Satan come from? Yes, I know the first answer is the internet, in which literally...
Did she say sexy Leighton? Maybe not.
Everything is reimagined to be sexy, but this interpretation actually dates back to the time before the internet. So what did it? The answer, like the answer to so many other literary questions, is that somebody wrote a critically acclaimed piece of revisionist fanfiction about it. In this case, a little ditty known as Paradise Lost. Now, Paradise Lost is weird for a variety of reasons, not the least of which being that someone looked at this and somehow saw this. But the more important weirdness is one that's easily overlooked by modern audiences, namely that this poem was originally written in English, and that it was about God. Okay, let me clarify that statement a little. Basically, Paradise Lost was an epic poem written at a time when the thought of writing an epic poem on anything but the Greco-Roman pantheons was pretty much unthinkable, let alone writing it in a garbagey commoner language like English. And on top of that, to complete his, inverse blasphemy, Milton began his poem by invoking a muse in traditional epic poetry fashion, but rather than pollute his nice biblical epic poem with the actual Greek muses, he instead went straight to the top and invoked the Holy Ghost himself to serve as the inspiration to this charming vignette. That's right, much like his protagonist, Milton was breaking all the rules. So our story begins, unsurprisingly, in hell, shortly after Sexy Satan and his pals were cast out of heaven. There's a more detailed explanation later, but the short of it is Sexy Satan called out God in front of all of his friends, there was a big old war in heaven, and Satan and his friends unsurprisingly lost. Now this is played like a fallen hero confronting a tyrannical ruler and being brutally crushed, but seeing as the POV character is, Satan, that perspective should probably be taken with a grain of salt. This reaches absurd heights when Sexy Satan dramatically begins to rally his fallen comrades, no pun intended, in a dramatic, heartfelt, and rousing speech that touched hearts around the world and should never be forgotten. And neither should the fact that it was being said by Satan. So anyway, this time, says Satan, they're gonna need to be sneakier because that. Oh, a brief side note. You may have noticed some so-called pagan gods in the crowd of fallen angels, including the entire Greek and Egyptian pantheons? Yeah, it's an unfortunate truth of religious writings that most authors don't allow for multiple sets of gods in the same literary universe. For a lovely subversion of this trope, read anything written by Neil Gaiman ever. Because this is one of those books about God with a capital G, I'm afraid our old Greek friends have been rewritten as demons in order to reconcile their existence with the big man upstairs. So anyway, the fallen angels make themselves a big shiny conference hall called Pandemonium and start debating how best to mess with God. Now, Sexy Satan has heard through the grapevine that God's fixing to make a new world populated by some new creatures who God would favor just as much, if not more, than the angels. And this, by the way, is where daddy issues Satan first originates. Anyway, yeah, new world, new losers. Satan decides the best way to screw with God is to do to these new beloved creatures what God did to him and his friends. Make them sin and thus fall.
Yeah, not so beloved now, are ya? Why should you be good enough for him when I wasn't? You can't even fly!
Daddy issues. So Satan sets about breaking out of hell so as to wreak havoc on God's new kids. This is complicated slightly by the fact that the gates of hell are guarded by Satan's daughter, Sin, and his son/grandson, really, don't ask, it's gross, Death. So Sin's like, yeah, I'm not opening the gate, God said not to. And Satan is like,
Oh yeah? Well, is God your real dad? I didn't think so.
and Sin's like, you make a fantastic point, and opens the gate for him. So Sexy Satan scoots heavenward through chaos, which is apparently where hell is, but that's not important right now, because smash cut to God, chilling up in heaven with his favorite son. So God apparently knows that Satan is going to tempt humanity to fall, and he's totally cool with it. But it is going to complicate matters with regards to humanity being able to enter heaven. So God decides to give everyone a conscience to help guide them in the right direction. But Jesus is like,
Hey Dad, it's great and all that humanity's gonna have a guiding conscience to keep them from sinning, but what about original sin? That's not something they can get rid of, and with it, nobody's gonna be able to enter heaven.
and God's like,
Gee, you're right. If only we had someone who'd be willing to incarnate and die really painfully in order to cleanse humanity of their sins. So, could I get a volunteer from the audience? Jesus, my boy? You want to do your old man proud?
So Jesus agrees, and God explains that Jesus will incarnate, die really painfully, defeat Satan and death itself, initiate the rapture, seal off hell, and become the sole ruler of the universe. Not necessarily in that order. Anyway, back to our nominal hero Satan, who's popped out into the solar system and encountered Uriel, the angel of light, who's hanging out on the sun, presumably for thematic appropriateness. So Satan disguises himself as a cherub, probably the more non-threatening version, and innocently asks Uriel which planet God's been building Eden on, since he really wants to get a little peek. Uriel points him Edenward, and Satan touches down in paradise. Now this is where Satan abruptly lapses into brooding self-pity, pondering how the true hell is the misery he brings with him. Wow, that sounds like a much easier problem to solve than actually being in hell. Have you considered yoga? So Sexy Satan runs away from his emotional problems and hops into the Garden of Eden to spy on Adam and Eve, who are hanging out and being all lovey-dovey. So Adam casually mentions that the only rule in Eden is not to eat the fruit of knowledge, so Sexy Satan's like,
Ha! For my brilliant plan, I'll make them eat the fruit of knowledge.
inspired. However, our hero Satan is discovered by the forces of heaven, led by the Archangel Gabriel, and they try to outcool each other for a few minutes before God gets tired of all the preening and tells Satan to scram before he gets his ass kicked. So Adam and Eve wake up the next morning, but Eve apparently had a bad dream involving a sexy angel telling her to taste his apple. So in the dream, Eve ate the apple and flew up to heaven with the angel guy. Yeah, What a horrible nightmare. So Adam's like,
Oh, there's no need to worry, darling. I know you'd never eat anything you're not supposed to.
So anyway, that evening, the angel Raphael comes down for dinner, mildly concerned about the prospect of Satan wreaking havoc in paradise. And he tells Adam and Eve what happened in heaven to facilitate the creation of hell and the fall of Lucifer. I'd explain in detail, but this is supposed to be a summary video, so instead I'll boil it down to 2 words. Daddy issues. That's right. Satan, used to being the big man's favorite creation, got all huffy when God introduced fan-favorite Jesus to the angel crew, and he felt like his spot at the top of the popularity charts was being threatened. Now, like any reasonable anti-hero, he decided to resolve this in the most needlessly self-destructive manner possible, guaranteeing that if he wasn't going to be God's favorite, he'd be his number 1 problem. And then war in heaven, blah blah blah, Jesus saves the day, blah blah, creation of the earth. Eve gets bored and wanders out halfway through, and I'm half tempted to join her. Hey, cut me some slack, I'm on vacation! So anyway, the next morning, Adam and Eve have a bit of an argument. Adam thinks they should work together in the gardens, while Eve thinks Adam's not the boss of her. And meanwhile, Satan sneaks back into Eden and possesses a snake, then lies in wait for one of the humans to come wandering by. Soon, who should appear but Eve, who's decided that asserting her independence while Satan is actively gunning for her and her husband is the best way to spend an otherwise lazy Wednesday. Oh, and here's another sexy bad boy trope for you. As soon as Satan claps eyes on the lovely Eve, he momentarily forgets his anger and hatred and is simply entranced by her ethereal beauty. And this is sort of a subtrope of the various love redeems the bad boy tropes, where the heroine's mere presence does a lot to soften the anti-hero. This handily saves the writer from having to write the heroine with more complexity than she's like so hot and super forgiving, so he can focus on the man crush Monday that is his bad boy anti-hero and his various emotional issues. Luckily for all of us, this trope is subverted very quickly as sexy Satan steals his nerves and lets the hate flow through him as he gears up to trick Eve into falling. So he gets Eve's attention and Eve's like, "What? Talking snake?" And Satan's all like, "Yeah, that's right, babe. I talk." And Eve's like, "I didn't know that was a thing." And Satan's like, "I bet there's a lot you don't know. Like, for example, a little old snake like me could gain the power of speech by sampling one of those delicious looking apples from that tasty forbidden tree." And Eve's like, "Oh, yeah, I can't do that. I'll die or something." And Satan's like, "Come on, babe. Don't you think God would admire your initiative for doing literally the only thing he told you not to do? It's not like he'll kill you or anything. I mean, I totally ate one. It's not like God cast me out of paradise over something as dumb and insignificant as that." And Eve's like, "Well, when you put it that way." So Adam's like,
Oh man, Eve, you f***ed up, and you f***ed up big time.
and Eve's like, "And Adam's like,
I mean, nothing. You know what, sweetie? I didn't mean anything. Hand me one of those apples. We're going down together.
Then they, go down together, wake up with a nasty wisdom hangover, and spend the rest of the day arguing over whose fault it was that they screwed up so badly. So the next day, Jesus pops down to deal with the issue, and he's like,
See, Eve, this is why you don't make decisions without your husband.
Oh, please. You think I couldn't have got that guy to do something stupid? I'm the father of lies. He's not even wearing pants.
Ah, I'm not even wearing pants. Not helping, Satan.
Ha! I've never had my existence summarized so succinctly before. Call me when Dad makes you suffer and die for these losers. I'll just be over here, ruling in hell.
"Daddy issues?"
I heard that.
So Satan returns triumphant back to hell, but the coolness of his re-entry is diminished somewhat by the fact that he and all his friends are abruptly turned into snakes, as punishment for the whole tempting humanity to fall thing. Don't worry, it doesn't stick, and he's back to his old sexy Satan-y self again shortly thereafter, but I imagine it's still rather jarring. Meanwhile, sin and death are wreaking havoc in heaven, God's trying to reorganize the solar system, and Adam and Eve are reconciling after that little hiccup in their relationship. Then they get thrown out of paradise. Hey, what do you want? They broke the rules fair and square. You want there to be no consequences for that kind of shenaniganery?
Kind of.
You shut your mouth, Lucifer. I see you back there. So Michael shows Adam some views of the future, which is basically the Bible on fast forward, and explains that Satan will get what's coming to him when Jesus comes back to life. So Adam and Eve descend out of Eden, secure in the knowledge that eventually things will get better.
Okay. I don't know if you can hear me, guys. But anyway, so you have the Adam and Eve Paradise Lost book. If you want to go and read the audio book, it's amazing. It's amazing. It is long, but it's amazing. I just want to touch on this. This is Adam's first wife, apparently. Before Eve. Okay. I think this is about if I share. Okay, good at this now, chat. Okay, so this is Lilith. This is the first wife of
When
Adam.
looking at demonology and the various figures that appear all throughout religion, there is one female figure, one name more so than any other, that has transcended across numerous cultures, and even to this day still routinely appears as a character in all sorts of popular culture. And that name is Lilith. Some of you may remember in the video discussing the succubus, Lilith was a name that appeared as an early example. The most common description of Lilith, however, is as a demon of the night, seductive and sexual in nature, but also deadly. And if that wasn't enough, she also waits until the cover of darkness to steal babies and young children. This concept can be traced all the way back to ancient Mesopotamian religion, where there once existed a figure known as Lamashtu, the daughter of the sky god Anu. To some, she was an evil goddess, to others a demon, a monster that plagued women during childbirth, one that would steal their children, suck out their blood and marrow, only to gnaw on the bones that remain. The mothers themselves were not safe from Lamashtu, and neither were their unborn children, as she could make women miscarry. As one of the most terrifying demons in Mesopotamian myth, her actions were not just limited to pregnant women. She would drink the blood and eat the flesh of men. She infected one's dreams until only nightmares were left. Wherever she went, she was followed by sickness, disease, and death. With these stories of Lamashtu, we can definitely see a parallel with creatures such as vampires.
Sounds like a good date, yeah, Chad? Good date, yeah?
And the succubi. Today, many think of Lilith as the first wife of Adam, who rebelled and was later replaced by Eve. This idea stems from the book of Genesis, the very first book in both the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament. Genesis 1 details the creation of the universe as well as everything inside of it. It says that God created the heavens, the earth, vegetation, animals, and lastly mankind in his own image, to rule over what he had created. What's important to note is that Genesis 1 states that he created both man and woman at the same time. Genesis 2 is very similar, discussing the creation of the universe, but it differs in regards to the creation of man and woman. Here, man was created first. Not wanting his creation to be alone, God sent man into a deep slumber and took from him a rib, which he would use to create the first woman. So essentially you have two contradicting accounts of our creation, one right after the other. To many, the word of God is sacred, and therefore cannot contradict itself. This led to scholars explaining the differences between Genesis 1 and 2 as describing two separate events, rather than two accounts of the same event. This in turn created the need for a story that explained these differences, which would be found in what is referred to as Midrash. The explanation here is that God needed to create woman twice, once with man and then again from man. The woman in the first story isn't identified in Genesis, but would eventually be known as Lilith. The woman in the second story is who we know from the Bible as Eve. So if you've ever heard the story of Eve being created from Adam's rib, that is the story found in Genesis 2. Lilith also appears in the Talmud, and these accounts are far less ambiguous than what we see in Genesis. She appears here a total of 4 times and is never referred to as Adam's wife. Where the Babylonians referred to Lilu as winged male demons, the Talmud speaks of Lilith or Lilitu as a demon with wings and the face of a woman. It says that a man sleeping in a house alone may be seized by Lilith, It's said that she collected the semen of men while they slept in order to create more demon offspring, which again can be seen as one of
So, chat. So, do you remember them when, this is for the boys and the men out there, in particular, when you was growing up and you woke up in the morning and you had all that little damp patch down in your budgie smugglers? Well, this is down to Lilith and her offspring, the succubi, the succubus. So, they're the ones that come and visit you in the night, causing you to have your little damp patch. Yeah, wet dreams, I think they were called in the 2022. They call wet dreams. Okay.
the earliest examples of the succubus. She is then also associated with several demons, one of these being Agrath, a demon of the night who preys on children and the vulnerable. So far we can see two distinct images of Lilith, the woman and the demon. But what happened in this middle ground from when she was created all the way up until she became a demon? Stories explaining this were developed in much more detail around the Middle Ages, so from the 5th century to the 15th. The Tales of Ben Sira and the Alphabet of Sirach are pieces of work that echo a sentiment that many scholars and scribes seem to agree upon. When Adam and Lilith were created, neither one of them wanted to submit to the other. To some, this just meant who assumed the dominant role in the relationship, whereas others took this to mean neither one wanted to assume the bottom position during sex.
Hello, Miss Wild Tribe. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm covering hell and the whole sort of story of hell. This is a real place. But this is touching on Lilith, a woman called Lilith, who was apparently Adam's first wife before Eve. I'm just going into it a little bit here now.
As it was a sign of subservience. With neither one of them willing to compromise, Lilith then fled the Garden of Eden. Out loud, she then pronounced God's real name, and in doing so she instantly became a winged demon. When the angels pursued her in the hopes of bringing her back, she told them she had no intention of returning. As punishment for her disobedience, the 3 angels who found her promised to kill 100 of her demon children every day. Her purpose now was only to cause illness and sickness to the infants of others. Whenever a child was born, she would claim dominion over that child for 8 days if they were a boy, and 20 if they were a girl. With this there came only one compromise. Whenever she saw the name of any of these 3 angels inscribed on a medallion or an amulet, that child would be left alone. There isn't much surviving material from the Akkadian Empire that allows for an in-depth analysis of Lamashtu or the Lilitu in relation to Lilith. But what we do know from the Babylonians and Sumerians is that all of these creatures were fairly similar, and it's not a huge stretch to say that they may have influenced Lilith's story in some way. The lack of information regarding her origin is made up for by how popular her story was. The Middle Ages mark this period like no other, with numerous tellings and interpretations. Depictions of her varied from a beautiful woman to a more sinister demon, and some even saw her as the snake in the Garden of Eden who tempted Eve with the forbidden fruit, as one final act of revenge. As time went on, there were folktales that saw Lilith as a demon queen, and thus related to Asmodeus, who many consider to be the king of demons. Asmodeus being mentioned in the Book of Tobit, the Talmud, and numerous other scriptures means it's not really a huge surprise that Lilith and he were paired together as the mother and father of demons. Together they had thousands of demon children and travelled from village to village causing
Thousands of demon children. Chat. Wow, what do you think of that?
chaos and destruction. In some stories, she's also closely linked with Samael, who himself is a rather odd character. Some teachings in the Cabal go as far to say that Lilith was Samael's consort, and that it was not God who created her, but instead Samael who made himself a demon wife. who filled the role later intended for Eve. He also gave her a host of demonic children, one of these being Asmodeus, who we mentioned earlier. Throughout all these stories, there are three main sides to Lilith. The woman who rebelled against God and Adam, which is the side we see the least of, the seductive demoness who plagued the dreams of men to grow her demonic family, and lastly the monster who preyed upon pregnant women, devouring their children. When I first read about Lilith, I immediately drew some parallels between her and some of the creatures we see in Greek mythology. When you think of an odious and foul-smelling bird-like creature, the harpies certainly come to mind, but so do the sirens, who have a more seductive nature. However, the character who closest resembles and embodies these three sides of Lilith is Lamia. These three stages are almost mirrored in her story. She begins as a regular woman who falls victim to lust, and as a result her children are killed as a punishment. She's then transformed into a monster. In some tellings, Lamia and the Lamiae are vampiric demons who feed off the blood of young, handsome men. There are also versions of this story where instead of young men she hunts for children, forever seeking revenge for those she had lost.
So chat, this sounds a little bit like what's that woman with the snakes on her head? She's got fucking snakes all over her head. What's her name? Medusa. Is it Medusa with the snakes? Similar, very similar, yeah. So I'm gonna. So this Lilith, guys. Let me get back on track now. This Lilith, she had offspring, right? And her offspring are called incubus, which visit women, and succubus, which visit men. Okay. Now, this is what they are. This is what each of them are. And they're the offspring of Lilith. Remember that, guys. Remember that. Lots of attention by the dirty men.
Hello there, my fellow mythologians and monster hunters, and welcome back to our series
Hello,
on mythical
Igor.
creatures and beasts. Today's topic has been requested many times by several people on my channel, so I decided to finally give in. The only reason I waited this long is because the imagery of today's topic might be a bit...
This wild tribe, these stories go back to Mesopotamia. They go back to the, if you have a look at the Lost Book of Enki sort of podcast that I done the other week, it goes all the way back to Sumerian, Mesopotamia, the first stories on clay tablets. All goes back.
bit problematic, at least from the perspective of YouTube. Regardless, I will try to use pictures that are not too spicy. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the succubus and the incubus. Since these entities don't have a huge amount of lore behind them, at least overview-wise, I decided to put them both in the same video. Also, they're more or less two sides of the same coin. I'm your host, the Grimdark Narrator, and without further ado, let us proceed, shall we? Nowadays, the word succubus doubtlessly conjures up images of women with long wavy hair, silky skin, and flawless curves. They wear skimpy leather outfits to flaunt their bodies, and they don't even try to hide the signs of their demonic appearance. These can be wings, usually bat-like, barbed tails, curled horns, and glowing eyes. But these creatures were not always this glamorous. From the dawn of their legend well through medieval times, succubi were considered hideous and deformed monsters. They were somewhat smaller than the average person, and they stooped and crawled instead of walking upright. Their feet were like those of raptors, their faces like those of a gargoyle, and their fingers ragged claws. Personality-wise, there is once again a difference between today's succubi and the succubi of ancient legend. The she-demons of today have intense charisma and seductive power to match their perfect looks. They are clever creatures who can tantalize men with words as much as they do with their body. They can be domineering and vengeful if they are slighted, but they ultimately take pride in their ability to please and manipulate men. The ancestors of today's succubi, on the other hand, had personalities as nasty as their physique. They were sneaky, controlling, and malicious. Despite being sex-crazed, they had no interest in pleasing a man. Instead, they used sex to their own purposes, to please themselves, to corrupt the pious, to gain life energy, and even to have children. Maybe the most famous seductress of all time, Lilith, is also known as the mother of all succubi. She appears in many cultures and mythologies, including Sumerian, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Judaic, and Christian. Lilith first appeared in Sumerian culture as a goddess of fertility and witchcraft. Later, the Assyrians and Babylonians began associating her with dark demons. The Greeks gave Lilith an extensive background.
So true, Mrs. Wildfire, so true. So because men are today much more weaker than they've ever been, men, and lazy. Yeah. So if they haven't got to go out and get a woman, yeah, then this succubus is their next best thing. Yeah. Think about it.
Backstory via the creature we now know today as Lamia. I actually made a separate video on the Lamia, so do watch it to learn more. Judeo-Christian mythology also put their own spin on the legend of Lilith. They described her as the first wife of Adam, created at the same time as him. Unlike Eve, however, Lilith was a lot more rebellious. She refused to honor Adam as her leader. Instead, she went on exploring on her own and discovered the Red Sea, where many demons dwelled. This rebellious woman found that she liked the demons a lot more than she liked Adam, so she mated with them and began, airtags, bearing Lilim at a rate of more than 100 a day. These Lilim then went out into the...
Holy shit. 100 a day? What happened to the 9 months?
world as demons and became what we know today as the succubi. Female sex demons have been around since the dawn of folklore. They can be found in many cultures across the world. India has the Yakshini, Arabian folklore has the Quarina, Native Americans have the Deer Woman, China has the Mogwai, and Greece has the Lamia, out of many. It is impossible to know which of these legends was first, if any. Most likely, many evolved separately around the same time. The word succubus itself, which is a combination of Latin words meaning to lie down, first appears in medieval English. By the late 15th century, these creatures were well known and often discussed by theologians, who tried to explain their origin, their ability to reproduce, their sexual appetite, and more. Later, succubi began popping up during witch hunts. They were women who tried to seduce men, and they were accused of being succubi in disguise. While, on the other hand, women who became pregnant outside of wedlock were accused of consorting with incubi. During the Renaissance, interest in the grotesque, subversive female demons declined. Instead, artists shifted their attention to the Greece's Lamia, who was both beautiful and unfairly cursed. It wasn't until the rise of Gothic literature that the succubi began to reclaim the spotlight. However, at this point, they were changed from their original form, being far more beautiful and intelligent. From a psychological perspective, the legend of the succubus is fairly straightforward. In the older days, many men were intimidated by women who took control of their lives and their own sexuality. So sometimes they literally demonized any kind of rebellious behavior. There might also be a biological explanation. A not insignificant amount of people suffer from sleep paralysis, a condition that causes the brain to regain consciousness before the body does. During an episode of this, people suffer from hallucinations involving all their senses and an extreme sense of terror. These symptoms can easily be mistaken for a demonic visitation. Now, the incubus is pretty much the male version of the succubus, but...
No, this is for you ladies. This is for you ladies. This is the one who they tend to be nastier and more deceiving.
There are a few differences as well. These creatures might seem silly and laughable, but they are in actuality quite dangerous, since they can cause unwanted pregnancies or even death. The word incubus is derived from the Latin preposition in, which in this case means on top of, and the word cubo, which is Latin for I lie. Thus, the word incubo translates roughly into I lie on top. Like many mythological villains, incubi have been glamorized in more recent times. Today, they appear as young men with perfectly etched muscles, powerful wings, and long suggestive tails. In the past, however, these nocturnal fiends were far from attractive. The original incubi were small creatures, with faces like that of a monkey or a gargoyle. They usually had dark skin or fur, claws, horns, and bat-like wings. When they weren't flying around through the dead of night, they crawled, climbed, and sat in a hunched position. Unsurprisingly, they also had exaggerated genitals. The incubi are famous for their insatiable lust, just like the succubi. These demons are so sex-crazed, however, that their human partners can literally die from exhaustion after too many midnight visits. The incubi can also be violent. Many victims describe the demon sitting on their chest or covering their mouths, so that they couldn't breathe. When an incubus arrives to have his way with a woman, he takes precautions to prevent her from interfering. He might put her in a trance, so she is unable to wake up, or paralyze her so completely that she can't even cry out for help. During the encounter, the incubus might try to impregnate the woman. Interestingly, the incubus itself is usually said to be incapable of reproducing, so it uses the sperm collected from a human male instead. If the woman gives birth to a child, it will be a so-called cambion, a human with some magical or demonic ability. One of the earliest mentions of the incubus comes from Mesopotamia once again, and the character known as Lilu. It is said that Lilu disturbs and seduces women in their sleep, while a similar demon, Lilitu, appears to men in their erotic dreams. Two other corresponding creatures appear as well, the Ardat Lili, who visits men by night and begets ghostly children from them, and Irdu Lili, who is known as the male counterpart to Ardat Lili, and visits women instead. These demons were originally storm demons, but they eventually became regarded as night demons due to mistaken etymology. According to some sources, the incubi and the succubi are said to be not different genders, but the same demon able to change their sex. A succubus would be able to sleep with a man and collect the sperm, and then transform into an incubus and use that seed on women. Though many tales claim that the incubus is bisexual, others indicate that it is strictly heterosexual, and finds attacking a male victim either unpleasant or detrimental. There's also many stories involving the attempted exorcism of incubi or succubi who have taken refuge in the bodies of men or women. According to the Malleus Maleficarum, exorcism is one of the 5 ways to overcome the attacks of an incubus. The others being sacramental confession, the sign of the cross or recital of the angelic salutation, moving the afflicted to another location, and by excommunication of the attacking entity. On the other hand, the Franciscan friar Ludovico Senestari stated that, and I quote, "Incubi do not obey exorcists, have no dread of exorcism, show no reverence for holy things, at the approach of which they are not in the least overawed." Cultures all across the world have sexually driven demons. The native Amazonian people believe in the boto, a pink river dolphin that turns into a male sex maniac at night. Chilean people believe in the trauco, a dwarf who seduces young virgins. Swedish people tell stories of a nocturnal horse who rides on the victim's chests at night. And in South Africa, the tokolosh stalks virgin women. Undoubtedly, throughout history, incubi were used more than once to cover up cases of sexual assault or rape. However, there may also be a less sinister explanation for the worldwide popularity of the incubus. Ironically, it's the same as the case of the succubus, aka sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis occurs when a person wakes up from REM sleep, but their body remains in a sleep-like state. Although the person is fully conscious, the muscles remain immobile, just like they are during REM sleep. The person might also experience pressure on the chest and a feeling of suffocation, since the body's pulse and breathing rate is slower, as in REM sleep. But the most terrifying symptom of all is the so-called hypnagogia, a multisensory hallucination that can conjure up visions and even smells and sounds. With all of these symptoms put together, sleep paralysis may be the closest thing to a demonic encounter that a sane person can experience. And this, my friends, has been what I wanted to tell you about both the succubus and the incubus for today. I know there's many offshoots of these sexually obsessed entities across the world, and I might cover some more of them in the future in individual videos. As it is,
okay, guys. So if an incubus visits a woman in her sleep, and a succubus visits a man, and they have sex with us, then it's what's called a cambion. And a cambion is, as it explains here, the offspring of that.
오늘의 캐릭터 릴리스.
Oh, good God, man.
Cambions are the half-breed offspring of demons and non-demons. A cambion is usually devilishly cunning and angelically beautiful, able to persuade even the most strong-hearted individual to do his or her bidding. Most cambions have demonic tendencies due to their demon parents. Cambions are said to be able to surpass their parents in power and strength, due to being a unique breed of demonic beings. In medieval legend, it was said that a cambion was the half-human offspring of the union between a human male and a succubus, or of an incubus and a human female, though in the modern age, it can be with a demon and a non-demon, being it human, deity or any other non-demon. The non-human offspring from whom they believe inherits its supernatural powers and abilities. Cambions are different from their other half-demon relatives. They are often spoiled by their adoring or enchanted parents. Even a strong-willed person will bend to the supernatural charisma of a cambion. Because of these dominating urges, many cambions can be controlling and manipulative. When the cambion is a stillborn, they shows no sign of life outside of being alive, meaning that the child has no pulse and no breath. This continues until the child is about 7 years old, where it becomes increasingly difficult to differentiate one from a human. Due to its inability to create or nurture life, the method of the creation of a cambion is necessarily protracted. A cambion is often seen as a beautiful human, nearly supernaturally attractive, taking after their infernal parent. Over time though, their personality soon begins to carve their true appearance, one that nearly resembles their parent. Cambions are said to surpass their parents in power and strength, due to being a unique breed of demonic beings. Myths and legends. In its earliest known uses, it was related to the word for change and was probably cognate with changeling. Since at least the 19th century, it has referred to the offspring of a demon with a human. The influential Malleus Maleficarum states that demons, including the incubus and the succubus, are incapable of reproduction. Because of this inability to create or nurture life, the method of the creation of a cambion is necessarily protracted. A succubus will have sexual relations with a human male and so acquire a sample of his sperm. This she will then pass on to an incubus, who then corrupts and strengthens the seed. The incubus will, in his turn, transfer this sperm to a human female and thus impregnate her. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe the channel and like. The real story of Medusa. Protective powers from a snake-haired Gorgon. In ancient Greek mythology, Medusa was the most famous of the three monstrous sisters known as the Gorgons. The earliest known record of the story of Medusa and the Gorgons can be found in Hesiod's Theogony. According to this ancient writer, the three sisters, Steno, Euryale, and Medusa, were the children of Phorcys and Ceto and lived beyond the famous Oceanus at the end of the world by night. Of the three, only Medusa is said to be mortal. But he is also the most famous, and the myth of his death at the hands of Perseus is often told. Why was Medusa cursed? Although Hesiod provides an explanation of Medusa's origins and Medusa's death at the hands of Perseus, he doesn't say much more about it. In contrast, a more comprehensive account of Perseus and Medusa can be found in Ovid's Metamorphoses. In this work, Ovid depicts Medusa as a beautiful girl. Her beauty caught the attention of Poseidon, who desired her and began to destroy her in the temple of Athena. When Athena discovered the sea god had destroyed Medusa in her temple, she took revenge by turning Medusa's hair into a snake, so that anyone who looked at her directly would turn to stone. Thus, Medusa's description changes from one of enchanting women, as Ovid describes in Metamorphoses. Medusa once had a charm, to get her love. A rival crowd of envious lovers struggled. Those who have seen it they have never tracked. More moving features on a cuter face. But above all, the length of her hair, they alone.
Everybody wants to get stoned.
In wavy golden curls and shining gracefully. Ovid, Metamorphoses. For the monstrous creatures that Virgil writes in a much less appealing way. In the center is Medusa the Gorgon, a huge monster whose mouth hisses with a serpent's lock. His eyes stared evilly, and under his chin the end of the serpent's tail was tied in a knot. Several other variations of the myth suggest that Medusa and the other Gorgons were always terrible, serpent-covered monsters. The legend of Medusa and Perseus. The complete myth of Perseus and Medusa begins years before they fight. Perseus was the son of Danae, daughter of Acrisius the king of Argos, and Zeus. The god had impregnated the princess in the form of golden rain after her father locked her up after learning from a prophecy that she would be killed by his grandson. Acrisius was afraid of the child, but wanted to avoid the wrath of Zeus, so instead of killing Perseus, he sent the baby and Danae overboard in a wooden coffin. Dictys from the island of Seriphus saves the two and he raises Perseus like a son. However, there was another person nearby who was not so kind to the boy. In the myth of Perseus, the hero is sent by Polydectes, brother of Dictys and king of Seriphus, in an attempt to bring him the head of Medusa. This was a hoax because Polydectes wanted Perseus' mother and wanted to get rid of her son, who did not support the relationship. Such a mission would be tantamount to suicide because Perseus and Polydectes did not expect him to return to Seriphus. Since Perseus was the son of Zeus, he was helped by the gods. Perseus received the invisibility hat from Hades, a pair of winged sandals from Hermes, a reflective bronze shield from Athena, and a sword from Hephaestus. With this divine gift, Perseus searched for Medusa and beheaded her with a bronze shield while she was sleeping. Immediately after the Gorgon was beheaded, the winged horse Pegasus emerged from its neck. In the Theogony, Hesiod also mentions that the golden giant Chrysaor, who was born with a golden sword in her hand, emerged from Medusa's severed neck. Sister Medusa also arrived on the scene at about the same time and chased after Perseus. But the hero escaped by using the cap of invisibility. Some versions of the myth say he also brought
Okay, that's Medusa. Now, I don't know if you guys know Jordan Peterson, but he's a very respected, well-known guy in any sort of field, and his opinion is heard lots. So this is him. This is him talking to Joe Rogan.
Hello, freak bitches.
You know, that's another one of the things I tried to think through is why you should tell the truth. So it's not self-evident, man. A smart kid, the smarter the kid, the earlier they learn to lie. Lying is very powerful because you can manipulate the world with your language, and then you can get what you want lots of times or escape from things that you don't want. So why not lie all the time? Well, I think the reason is, there's a bunch of reasons, but one of them is that you can't trust yourself if you lie. And there's going to be times in your life where you have no one to turn to except you. And so if you've stuffed yourself full of lies, then you're going to be in a crisis one day and you're going to have to make a decision and you're going to decide wrong. And you're going to be in real trouble because you won't have the clarity of mind necessary to make the proper judgment because you've filled your imagination and your perception with rubbish. So, and if you really think that through, you see, there's this old idea in the Old Testament that fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And I kind of understand what that means. Because one of the things, say, we do with the future authoring program, we offer people a little heaven. It's like, okay, construct your ideal, aim at it, come up with a plan. You got to modify the plan, no problem. You're going to do a bad job of it, no problem, just do it. Okay, so then now you've got a goal. It's now your approach systems, technically speaking, the positive emotion systems that motivate you are engaged because they're engaged in relationship to a goal. And the more transcendent the goal, the more they're engaged. But that's not good enough. It's great to run towards something you like, but it's even better to run away from something that terrifies you. So then we ask people, okay, so here, think about this real carefully. Take all your faults and your inadequacies and your hatred for life, all of that. And then imagine that gets the upper hand. And then think about where you could be in 3 to 5 years. And everyone knows, hey, some people know they'd be a street person. Some people know they'd be an alcoholic. Some people know they'd be a prostitute or a drug addict. Like everybody's got their own little hell they could descend into with fair degree of rapidity and a fair bit of enjoyment. And people know that. And so I say, well, delineate that out too. So you know where you're headed when you fall off the path. And so then you're running away and running towards, it's like, yes, well, that's heaven and hell. And you need it, and they're real. They're as real as anything that you can. It depends on what you mean by real, I suppose, but they're as real as you make them. How about that? And people can make hell pretty real.
People do seem to construct these pitfalls for themselves. I mean, self-sabotage is one of the most common things that you find in people that are struggling. I mean, you would think that someone who is struggling, the last thing they'd want to do is help themselves towards their own demise. But it's super common.
Yeah, well, I thought about that too, and so you tell me what you think about this. Because if you talk to people, they say, well, I want to have a meaningful life. Generally, people want that. But then you think, well, then why aren't you? And then you think, well, what does it mean to have a meaningful life exactly? And then you think, well, maybe it means that you have to take on responsibility, because your sacrifices have to be worth something, right? It has to have some meat, what you're aiming at. It has to be something that can elevate your worm-like self to the level of tolerability. You know, you can say, well, yeah, I've got all these flaws, but look at what I'm trying to do.
Right.
That's the real ground of self-respect. Well,
Play this little tinky feel. Coming back to the real world. It's hell on earth.
Be from Rotherham, but because of everything that's gone off, it's difficult to say that now.
It's all right. It's not. I don't think it's all bad. There's good and bad everywhere, really, but it's not where I want to be forever. Definitely not.
There's bad in everybody, like, don't matter what colour creed there is. I think, you know, what's done is done, but you've got to pick your lives up again.
You never expect it to happen in a town that you live in. I think it's the evil of some people you can never quite believe.
There's a lot of abusers in the town. The town's full of them. I'll never go back to Rotherham. I won't want my children growing up in Rotherham either.
This is Rotherham, the town at the centre of one of the biggest child abuse scandals in recent history. 1,400 children were abused. They were raped, tortured. The police and the council were found to have totally failed the young people in their care. So we've come up to the town to find out how a place like this survives and moves on.
Guilty verdicts in the trial that exposed the exploitation of vulnerable teenage girls.
1,400 children subjected to appalling sexual abuse in Rotherham by gangs of men over a 16-year period.
Because gangs were of Pakistani origin and most of their victims were white, the authorities shied away from the issue.
Some were worried about being called racist. Others were more bothered about community cohesion than protecting children.
Bullying, sexism, suppression and misplaced political correctness.
We're living vicious, traumatic events for the courts that for many of these young women completely shattered their lives.
At first I don't know, I thought he was a bit freaky. And then he just seemed to be really nice. Like, always give me compliments. He used to always cuddle me, kiss me, and tell me that he loved me. And then he used to always text me with nice things. He used to always ring me when I was in school to meet him. He always said that he'd never let anybody hurt me. And then one of the days he attacked me, and I couldn't breathe.
I don't think there's many people that would say, yeah, I'm from Rotherham and I'm happy about it. I don't think there's many people around that would say that anymore. For someone to be so negative in press and in media, like, there's no positive, like, at all. So now, if you do go anywhere and say, oh, I'm from Rotherham, it's first thing they ask you about, whereas nobody knows how good about you. Like, there's things that, like, I'd do massively different. Like, if I go out on a night out with my friends, there's no way we'd get a taxi home, or especially not on his own, like, we'll get a lift or we'll stay in house rather than going out.
How do you think Rotherham's changed?
Like, when I were at school, we'd go to the park and hang about until 9, 10 o'clock at night and then go home, whereas now, like, I said to my kids who were coming here, like, don't go anywhere when it's dark, don't do this, don't do that, make sure you don't. Because, I mean, it's all right, like, everybody will say, like, oh, parents shouldn't be letting them out, but it's easy for a kid to lie to the parents and say, oh, I'm going to my mate's house, and then the mate will say the same thing to their mum and dad, and it just doesn't happen. They're just roaming about on the streets, and it's not a safe place to be anymore. I think it'd just be like, you can't trust anybody. Nobody walks about with, like, a rapist sticker on the forehead. You don't know who they are, you don't know what they look like. They're quite obviously still out there, probably living a normal life, and it could be anybody. Like, if you go out round town or if you go shopping in town centre, like, it could even be a person that's saving you at till, or you don't know.
Yeah, we just used to meet at the leisure centre, in the alleyways in town. Sometimes we just used to sit there and talk and listen to music. And then there'd be times when he used to force me to have sex with him and force me to do other stuff even though I said no. But then if I didn't do it, he used to threaten me.
I totally, against it, what they've done. I know we don't, we're just like normal, people, like anybody. Don't matter about colour, religion. It's just we just trying to make a living in the day, and just they can't point fingers at any person.
What's it like for you being a cab driver now in Rotherham?
It's affected it, a lot, because people, are nervous about it. They're probably scared, I don't know. But you don't know what they're thinking in the back of their mind, honestly. Trade has been affected sometimes,
Have you had abuse?
It's just, one of the customers on weekend, outside town, picked them up, like, two lads, one lass. And it's just, trying to ask me, what do you think about it? I said, it's bad what's happened. And then they're on about it, right up to me ears, and they're swearing and everything, It's terrible. I was stressed, honestly, at that time. Just abuse, that's what they were. Recently, abusing me, like.
I thought it was normal. I thought it's what girls did. So there was a lot of girls that did it. So to me it was normal. He had his arm around my throat, and then he had his hand digging in my back. And he was so abusive. Called me a white bitch, told me he was going to kill me. And the more I tried to get out of it, the more he strangled me and dug his hand in my back. To the point where I thought I was actually going to pass out. And then he eventually let go and he threw me. So I fell on the floor.
A criminal's a criminal, doesn't matter what race, what creed, what background he comes from. You deal with the criminals, and I think the police, the council, have failed in their duty of care to these young, vulnerable adults, young girls who have everlasting. And now, in terms of what's happened, with a lot of people, it's made the Asian community tarnished within the same.
You are not Asian. You are not Asian.
Same look in life where we're all seen as groomers, we're all seen as paedophiles. We've had lots of violence, lots of racial attacks, racially motivated attacks. So I am very concerned about my children. I want them to walk in the streets feeling secure. I want them to walk in the streets feeling proud of their heritage and being proud.
It's not your children who's being targeted, love. Yeah? It's not your children who's being targeted. Let's get that right. Let's get that right.
Part of Rotherham community. I don't believe that I can leave them outside and just come back inside. I won't trust their safety.
You're that scared?
Yeah.
What's it like to sit down and having to explain to your children what's happened here?
Really hard, really hard. It's a conversation you would have with a 15, 16-year-old, not 10, 11-year-olds. It's almost you're taking away their innocence. But you weigh up the pros and cons, and it's the lesser evil that you have to explain to them.
And it just got worse and worse.
Did she explain to her children that it wasn't them who was going to be targeted by these grooming gangs? Just be fearful of the single white pedo.
There was more men involved, and they was doing stuff more often. Forcing me to have sex with them and other sexual stuff. Yeah, I thought I was going to die. It got that bad. I didn't think I was going to live much longer, because I thought they was going to kill me.
At times, Rotherham has felt like a deeply divided town, marked by blame and suspicion. Since September 2012, there have been 15 protests in the town, many involving far-right groups.
There's nothing to stop anybody at any time going anywhere over the town centre and having a protest, and that does affect kind of customers, just because if you can't walk up and down certain streets, it directly affects your trade. There's no way about it, and it's tough when streets are closed to have protests. Customers can't get in or get past, or so it makes a big impact when it's the difference between staying afloat and going under for certain businesses. It's hard to remember the time before not knowing, sort of thing. You find out more information, you want to know what happened and what went wrong, and then you go through the kind of acceptance and how you move forward, and making sure that everyone gets justice, making sure that you know that it never happens again, that the things are in place so that people feel comfortable to move forward, and that everyone feels comfortable to go to people when things do go wrong. And it is a journey, and I think the town's been through it together. And I think now, especially with there being more support in place, more knowledge, more acceptance, that we are now in a place that people understand the issues a lot more than they ever did before.
It was just like, what's the point in trying to tell people if they're not going to listen, if they're not going to help me? It was like, where do I go? Who can I turn to? I was called a liar for years. I didn't want to tell my family, because I didn't want them to be mad at me. I used to self-harm, because that just used to take the pain away.
There were that many girls that were abused, and then it affects all the family, all the friends, all that. So it must have been like a massive amount of people who it's affected, and I can't personally see how you get over that. And obviously to know that some police knew about it and didn't do anything, and how far up it went, like, you can't trust anybody anymore.
I think it'll get better, when it dies down, hopefully, people will just get on with their lives, and we'll get on with our lives, there shouldn't be a problem there.
I will stay because I do believe in people of Rotherham. I do believe in communities of Rotherham. I've lived here, I've worked here. I know lots of very, very decent people, and I think together we can rebuild this town to the greatness that it was.
I will not.
Feature of our wretched world is a strange inconsistency in public policy. On the one hand, anything you care about, the government professes
Dark and gloomy stuff today, guys. I told you this shit was going to go on. It's going to go out there.
to be entirely impotent to do anything about. For example, Muslim grooming gangs engaged in mass sex slavery of young girls in every town up and down the land. All a bit complicated, old boy. Best thing to do is have an official inquiry that keeps everything hush-hush until the 12-year-old girls are in late middle age. Thus, quote, I'm sorry for the hurt and the ongoing trauma. There are no excuses. Sexually exploited children in Oldham were failed by those who were meant to protect them. Damning report finds, a damning report on sexually exploited children in, where was it this time? Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Oxford, insert your town here. The state does nothing about the serial gang rape of young girls in every corner of the realm. On the other hand, if you misgender someone on Twitter, the same state can dispatch half a dozen plods to quiz you on your transphobia. West Yorkshire Constabulary, I don't want to single them out, they're no more or less useless than South Yorkshire Constabulary, but West Yorkshire sat by and let the so-called grooming gangs have the run of the county. But as we reported last week, they were out in force to arrest Paul Golding, leader of the entirely lawful Britain First party, and prevent him from campaigning in the Wakefield by-election. A judge has now quite rightly thrown out the quite improper bail conditions that prevented Mr. Golding from entering the constituency. You might find Britain First a bit butch for your tastes, but they're entirely legal. And outside of banana republics with police chiefs in reflector shades, the coppers do not get to determine which leaders of lawful political parties are permitted to participate in democratic politics. But it gets worse than that. On these supposedly intractable issues, the state is, as a practical matter, in cahoots with the bad guys. Quote, the Rochdale grooming gang leader, Shabir Ahmed, worked as a welfare officer in Oldham, unchecked for 3 years, despite being accused of serious child sexual abuse. Oh, so the guy who's running the operation that's gang raping all the children is actually an employee of the state agency that's supposed to prevent these things. And it wasn't just for 3 years, but for much, much longer. Mr. Ahmed was a, quote, welfare rights officer in the, quote, welfare rights unit. So if you like raping young girls, that's the mother lode. The British state enabled him to take his work home with him, literally. That's one story we're going to stay on with our friend Sammy Woodhouse through this week. And Maggie Oliver is going to be here with Patrick Christys in an hour's time, because there isn't a lot to be said for a nation that lets its most vulnerable children be gang raped with impunity decade in, decade out. Speaking of which, they may be needing a new welfare rights officer in Linton-on-Ouse in North Yorkshire any day now. Olga Mathias will be here from Yorkshire on today's show. But again, HMG is anxious to communicate its impotence on the vexing issue of migrants. All very complicated, old boy. If it were up to us, they'd all be on their way to Rwanda pronto, but unfortunately there's this European Court of Human Rights, so some eminent jurist from Albania or Azerbaijan is tying our hands. That doesn't exactly explain why the organs of the British state, the UK Border Force, the Royal Navy, are now actively facilitating the migrant tide across the Channel. The Royal Navy, which did more than any other institution on the earth to stamp out slavery, is now actually colluding with human trafficking in the waters off the coast of southern England. Extraordinary. The Royal, and shameful, actually. Shameful. The Royal National Lifeboat Institute has been the principal body responsible for saving lives in the waters off Britain, Ireland and surrounding islands for 2 centuries now. It has been so apolitical that even those touchy Irish nationalists of 100 years ago were happy to keep the RNLI on as the designated nautical rescuer for the waters of the Irish Free State, notwithstanding its royal charter and royal patronage and royal this and royal that. They've rescued over 140,000 people from an indefinite term in Davy Jones' locker. But look at this footage. This is the RNLI arriving at Dover with another 4 dozen strapping young lads they're bringing in for the priority check-in to the UK. Do these 4 dozen get added to the 140,000 the RNLI have rescued? If so, it's going up by hundreds every day. And in what sense are these persons being rescued as opposed to being at a pre-arranged rendezvous with a French vessel at which they're transferred from one boat to another? Nigel Farage says the RNLI is now a taxi service. You can feel free to disagree, but it's not what the RNLI is set up for, is it? And if you'd said to those touchy Irish chappies in 1922, oh, by the way, our principal function now will be to land hundreds of non-Irishmen on the beaches of Waterford every night, I doubt His Majesty's government in the Irish Free State would have kept them around another day. So the government is using its purported impotence in these matters as a cover for the fact that it's actually joined the other side. If you voted to end the migrations, well, sorry, evidently the human traffickers made a better offer. Our society is bifurcating. On the one hand, law-abiding persons are micro-regulated in every aspect of their lives. On the other, lawless persons have the run of the land, and the state professes to be powerless to do anything, while at the same time actually actively assisting them.
An inquiry found in Rotherham there were more than 1,400 victims, 1,400 victims of grooming and sexual exploitation between 1997 and 2013. That's just in one town, but it gets worse. Then it happened in Rochdale, and then in Rochdale they found that basically sentences were given up to 19 years because of crimes committed against girls between the age of 13 and 15 in and around Rochdale between 2008 and 2010. Then there was a case in Oxford in 2013 where 5 Muslim men were convicted and handed sentences at the Old Bailey for exploiting girls between 11 and 15. All of the men were of Pakistani origin, except for 2 who were North African, also Muslim. Then it was in Bristol, where 13 Somali Muslim men were jailed for more than a total of 100 years after they were convicted in 2014 of running an inner-city sex ring. Then in Aylesbury, 6 South Asian men were jailed in 2015 for grooming underage white girls between 2006 and 2012. Then, in Peterborough, a total of 10 men were convicted of child sex crimes in the town. And the boss, Muhammad Khobaib, who was originally from Pakistan, he was jailed for 13 years at the Old Bailey after he was found guilty of forcing a 14-year-old girl to perform a sex act on him. And then Newcastle, and Daniel, you know what? It's too depressing to carry on. It goes on and on. One second, Daniel. The pattern in all of these, overwhelmingly, is South Asian Muslim men, primarily Pakistani, sometimes Somali Muslims, sometimes North African Muslims. It doesn't help us, Daniel, to pretend this wasn't a phenomenon that was replicated across the country. What I would advise you, you said you're a South Asian Muslim man, therefore your name probably is Daniel or something other than Daniel. I would advise you to address this topic head on and not pretend it's not a national phenomenon, because I guarantee you that anger will rise if you come on radio and pretend this is not a national problem.
I'm not here pretending in any way, buddy. I'm not here pretending in any way. I just wanted to make sure, like, and the statistics that you showed me is right. But at the same time, okay, the pockets and areas that you suggested, okay, if you follow national statistics in regards to the paedophilia gang, nationally, when I'm saying, I'm talking Great Britain, not just England, right? Great Britain, right? The biggest problem that we have paedophilia, and it's been spotted, and it comes in.
It's the white man.
It goes away and fades away, right? Which is basically mentioning the Catholic Church, which is mentioning.
Yeah, there you go. Push the blame black. That's basically what happens. Okay. So, this is what got Tommy locked up.
So I'm at Leeds Crown Court, where these men here, let me see. Oh lads, how you feeling? How you feeling about your verdict? How you feeling about your verdict? How you feeling about your verdict? What verdict? How you feeling about the verdict? You got your prison bag for you?
Yeah, look here.
Got your bags for you? You got your bags for you?
Yeah.
How you feeling about the verdict?
Oh, suck your mum's funny.
You got no guilt. Is there any guilt? Is there any guilt, mate? Is there any guilt?
Fucking dad. You're son of a bitch.
So, as you can see there,
bearing in mind the BBC have already covered this, mate. The BBC have already covered it.
doesn't seem like much guilt. Doesn't seem like anyone's ashamed. I'm outside Leeds Crown Court, where today 10 men are facing verdicts. They're verdicts for a alleged grooming and rape scandal involving hundreds of young girls, but there's 18 victims come forward. Some of these girls were as young as 11. Let me read you the list of charges that these men are facing. There's 6 more who are still yet to come here. This is part 2 of the trial, you see, because 29 men, 29 people, 2 women, are involved in this case. 30% of them are called Mohammed. 3 of the men walking in here today are called Mohammed. The defendants today, Mansour Akhtar. He's charged with rape, attempted rape, and 2 counts of trafficking. Mohammed Akram. He is charged with 7 counts of rape, 3 counts of trafficking, child abduction, supplying drugs, sexual assault, and making threats to kill. Wikas Mahmud. He is charged with 3 counts of rape. Nazarat Hussain. He is charged with 3 counts of rape, attempted rape, inciting a female to engage in sexual activity. Sajid Hussain. He is charged with 3 counts of rape, facilitating the commission of sexual activity on a child and inciting a child into sexual activity. Mohammed Ifraz. He is charged with trafficking a female within the UK with a view of her sexual exploitation, rape, false imprisonment, child abduction, taking decent images of children, inciting children to engage in sexual activity. Fasil Nadeem. He is charged with supplying drugs, rape, possession of extreme pornography. Mohammed Azeen, another Mohammed. He's charged with 3 counts of rape. Mansour Hassan Lockwood. He is charged with supply. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. You just. There's a rape trial going on, yeah? There's a rape trial going on. Okay?
Why is it your business?
There's a rape trial going on.
Why
Yeah?
is it your business?
So why am I a tosser for reporting on it?
No, you're a tosser for being you.
Yeah, go on. Go explain it. Explain it.
as
What do you think? What do you think of the 29 young children aged 11
It's
who have
not
been
my-
gang?
it's not my concern.
It's not your concern. It's not my concern. They're
You're
young
just
English
a
girls.
wanker.
It's not my
It's not
concern.
your
This is the
concern.
problem. You see that? It's not my concern. It's not
your
his
concern.
concern. Hundreds of young girls have been gang raped in our country, in every town and city across this country. Some of the men are alleged to be in court. The alleged
perpetrators are in court today, and people need to know what's going on. People need to know these court cases are happening. Obviously, the problem is you have people like that who think I'm a wanker for reporting on it. Now, there is a reporting restriction on this case, so there's already been stage 1 of the trial. Think about how big these trials are. Think about the victims here. These victims, this trial only come to light in 2013 when a victim and her mother went to the police. These crimes were between 2004 and 2011. Now, obviously, back then, police ignored it. But I guarantee you the parents would have gone to the police in those same time periods. But these men, one of these men is actually working in a chicken shop, I believe. Currently working in a chicken shop in Huddersfield. Would you want your children going into a chicken shop where men are alleged to have gang raped and prostituted and trafficked and drugged young victims? Would you want them having contact? Anyway, we'll stay live. We'll wait for the other alleged offenders. I have to be super careful, you see, because when I was coming to these court cases, part of what the police did was they dawn raided me and they put me on a contempt of court charge, which would mean that I could face prison or I'm on a suspended sentence, because they don't want people reporting. They don't want the public watching these videos. They don't want you to see. You see the men walking in court there today. That man, who knows, he might get a not guilty, but that man is alleged to have gang raped or been involved in rape and prostitution, etc., yeah, of young children. He didn't seem bothered, did he? In fact, he seemed aggressive, angry. Can you believe that bloke? Can you believe that bloke? He's walking past. I'm reporting on the fact that dozens of young children aged 11 have been groomed, raped and prostituted, and it's not any of his business or my business. It's not our problem. That's him. That's the problem. That is part of the problem. Knows nothing about the case. Nothing at all. Yeah, could be his sister. Could be his daughter. Until it is his sister or his daughter, that's the only time he'll probably wake up. Until then, it doesn't matter. As he told you, it doesn't matter. Scumbag. People like him are the reason this has been allowed to get away with for so long. It's no, what's it got to do with you? What's it got to do with you? What's it got to do with me? I'm an Englishman and they're English girls. They're women, they're young girls. And they're in our country and they're being groomed and raped because of that. It's got everything to do with me. Should we stay live? Officer, are these stairs, so if you're not allowed to go on those stairs, am I? Whilst recording. This isn't the property of the court though, is it? No, it's this. Okay, so I'll stay off then.
If Tommy's listening or watching, and I hope he doesn't strike me. I love you, Tommy, but yeah, I mean this with all the greatest of respect. This is about the run, devil man, run. You are not the devil for sure, but there's a lot of runners. So, Tommy, this one's for you.
Cool. So, as I said, the first part 1 of this trial has already concluded, because it's impossible to have a trial with 29 defendants at the same time. So this trial has been split into 3 sections. Part 1's already been concluded, but no one can report on whether they're found guilty or not guilty. Part 2 concludes with the jury are making their verdict now. Part 3 starts, I believe, in September. So these young children, after being raped, after being groomed, and their families, they then have to sit and watch for a year. A year. And the cost, think about the cost. Think about why they let these grooming scandals, why they ignored them. Do you know how much of a case it is to bring 29 men on a conspiracy charge and these sort of charges? Massive. The costs of 29 men with 29 barristers, with 29 QCs, with all these different things. The cost is huge. Do we have the prison places to deal with all of the men, all of the Muslim men who have raped across this country? No, we don't. That's why we don't deal with FGM either. But these are sort of like, in each town and city, they're picking out one group. But there's hundreds and hundreds that need dealing with. So, yeah, stay viewing if you want to see the other alleged men. They'll be here soon. And I'll be here. I'm at Leeds Crown Court I'll be here, I'll be sitting in on the trial, seeing what happens with the verdicts. Unfortunately, I won't be able to report the verdicts, from what I understand. But I'll keep the footage, etc., to do a report. I'm also travelling to another city in the north of England tonight to spend time with campaigners who are trying to deal with this sexual exploitation and grooming. If you call it grooming, it's more, I refer to it as these scandals. Hold on. But they had their... Oh, it's grim up north, isn't it? Sunny in Luton. I just got some flip-flops on when I left home this morning. I left home whilst we're on here, whilst we're live. I will be travelling from this city to another city. I will spending time with groups, doing interviews, highlighting and showing people what's happening in towns and cities with regards to grooming gangs or rape jihad gangs across the north of England, across our whole country. I wouldn't be able to do any of that if it wasn't for the people who sign up to support me at tommyrobinson.online. So if you're one of those people and you're watching videos and you're seeing these news stories get highlighted or things the media are ignoring, then the only way I'm able to do that is through your support. I have George and Kaylin, two of my team, with me today. Kaylin's been sitting since 5 o'clock this morning when we left, editing a video that will go up today, which is an interview with the leader of the joint leader of Generation Identity. And I met him because the newspapers this week, I read headlines that said Heil Hipster, like Heil Hitler. So I thought, who's this man? And then one of them said, meet the new chilling face of fascism. I've seen all these sort of headlines about myself, so I thought I'd bypass the prostitutes, the bullshit media. I'd sit down with the man himself and ask him some hard questions or some frank questions about what his views are on race, on religion, etc., etc. So I sat down and spoke to him, and that interview will go live. Yes, that interview will go up today. And I think it's important to give you the other side of the story, and rather than you base your opinion of somebody on what the media tell you about them, surely the media should have sat down with him and asked him the questions that I've asked him. You'd have thought so, wouldn't you? But of course they don't want you to listen to him. They don't want you to listen to anyone who speaks out against mass immigration or against the problems that this country faces. They want you to base your opinion and judge him on what they tell you to think. So yeah, that'll go live today. And then we have this weekend, we're up north today. Sunday we will be interviewing a Polish politician who's coming to speak at Speaker's Corner. I'll be asking him his opinion of the situation in England, what Polish people think, Polish people who've moved to the UK, what they think of this country now that they've been here, what he hears about our country, and of course why he's at Speaker's Corner. The fact that we have given birth again to the Free Speech Centre of Speaker's Corner, I also would like to thank everyone who's been involved in that. Politicians, we could be waiting here a little while. They're not actually due in court till 10 o'clock, I don't think. But that's why I got here early, because I knew some of them would turn up early, like those lads there. Didn't really get the cleanest shots of them, but when I first come to try and show people who these men were, bearing in mind they've been walking around your towns and cities for the last 2 years whilst this has been going on. They've been working in shops, chicken shops, probably driving taxis, etc., etc. I thought people should know their faces and their identities. And when I went last time, you can see the footage, you go online, watch it. They turned up with balaclavas, they tried to get physical, and they all hid their identities. But because they've been relaxed, do you know why they're relaxed? Because look, there's no media here. There's no media here, there's no press here, there's no mainstream media. They're all taking photographs of someone who said something mean on Twitter. They're not here to find who these people are. They haven't followed these people. You know this lad who runs Generation Identity? I found out that the media had been harassing his family. Yeah? You want to harass someone's family? You see that man who was getting aggressive as he walked into court? The man who faces charges of child abduction, rape, prostitution. Harass him. Find him. Go knock on his door. Follow him. See where he works. See what he's doing. You want to stick pictures online and call people and slander people? How about you do it about them? Instead of doing it about someone speaking about them. Who knocks? That's what I said as well. Like, he doesn't even live with his parents. The young leader, he's 23 years old, doesn't even live with his parents. And do you know why I get quite frustrated about it? Because I know all the same things have happened to me. So I know what he's facing. Hello, mate.
Hand, I agree with the stuff you say. I watch your stuff and that.
Oh, thanks, man.
Amazing, mate.
Thank you very much. Cheers, man. Thank you. So yeah, I get quite angry, because I just think his family are innocent, and they plastered the family's names all online. Why would you do that? They do that so that it causes, it's all disruption tactics. It's disruption tactics, and it's to disrupt your life and cause you maximum problems. So, for example, in the early years of my activism, I had my mum sitting down crying, begging me to stop. As I'm sure that young lad who I interviewed just yesterday or the day before, I'm sure his family have done the same now. And that's what they want them to do, which is why they've done it, which is why they highlight who they are, which is why they highlight where he worked, because he just lost his job. All of these things play a major part. It's all part of the operation from the far left to silence and stop people. A few more officers have turned up. We're getting wet. Let's go over here. So, do we have any questions? And yeah, you say, I can't believe that bloke, man. What a sad representation of Leeds for the first person who comes and makes a comment, and it's saying that it's got nothing to do with us. And what's it got to do with us? And he doesn't care. Doesn't care that 11-year-old children were gang raped and prostituted, and everyone knew about it, police, councils. He doesn't care. Doesn't matter. Scumbag.
Nobody fucking cares.
Idiot.
Nobody cares, bruv.
He cares more that I'm talking about. He cares more that I'm talking about. Hi, guys.
Hello.
We're live. We have 3.6 thousand people. Say hello.
3.6, very good. Hello. Very nice.
Very nice. And do you miss them as they come into court? It's like, yeah, fuck your mother.
Yeah, just don't hear the video.
The difference is that most of these trials, which is the reason I come here today, not really about the perpetrators or the alleged perpetrators, more so about their families, because at each one of these trials usually, loads of their families usually come to support them. And then when they're convicted, the families shout about the young girls being slags. 11-year-old slags. They'd be children. But of course, under Islamic ideology, they're not children, they're women, as soon as they start their periods. So they see it as their own fault, and it's our fault that they're on the streets and they shouldn't have been out late at night, and all of these things that are our fault. It's nothing to do with the men abusing them. Or you hear certain politicians, I've seen certain politicians turn around and say that this happens because of opportunity. So the reason it's all taxi drivers is because of opportunity. Okay, well, don't all the non-Muslim taxi drivers have the same opportunity? But they don't do it, do they? In mass scale, like this. So it's obviously not to do with opportunity. There's obviously another reason. There must be some sort of connection as to why 30% of the alleged perpetrators of these crimes in this one trial are named Mohammed. There must be. So if you want to raise these problems and eradicate them and get to the root cause of the problem, then you have to look at the problem and see what common. If it was any other crime, you look for the. If it was any other crime, you look for the common denominator, don't you? To try and erode the motives and what's happening. Any other crime, you'd be piecing this together, and you'd be asking why. But you're a bigot and a fascist if you do that same scenario with these sort of. Just so anyone who's watching this who don't know the statistics, 90% of grooming gang. This is a grooming gang, not paedophilia. The majority of paedophilia offences in the UK are committed by white people, as you'd expect from a 90% white country. That's what you'd expect, right? But in a country that has 4% of this population, 3% of the population is Pakistani, 4% of the population, or 5% of the population is Muslim. Now, out of that population, 90% of the grooming gang convictions are Muslim males. 90%. 30% are called Mohammed. These are statistics, they're facts. These are not Tommy Robinson's views. They're just facts. And I know a lot of people don't like facts, but they're facts. So, that's the reality. And that's only going to get worse and worse and worse as the police get to grips and try and tackle these gangs. Rotherham, if you look at Rotherham alone, Rotherham where 1,400 children were raped, some more statistics. Rotherham alone. Rotherham, I think, has been used as a scapegoat city because Rotherham probably has one of the least amount of grooming in the north of England because it has a very small Muslim population. Just 3,500 Muslim males aged between the ages of 18 and 50 or 60, which is the grooming, which is the age that was given for these men. Some children raped by 20, 30 men in one weekend. So in that small Muslim population, you had 1,400 children were raped. A minority, is it? So if you went to bigger cities, now the same sort of inquiry that resulted in the Rotherham report has been being called for in Bradford, but they're refusing. The government are refusing. They're refusing Telford. There's not many Muslims in Telford, really. Not really. Not compared to Luton or Birmingham or Bradford. But again, Telford, huge. That's some Muslim lads who are just saying, it's not us, it's not us. It's not us. Because that must, yeah, and the same again, listen, if you're watching this, yeah, and I'm talking about Muslims, I'm talking about Islam, I know some Muslim lads who would be as outraged growing up, yeah? So I'm not, and again, I'm not portraying it as all Muslims, yeah? There's a problem. The majority of grooming offences are Muslim. The reason and justification given for it can be found in the Quran. All of these things play a role, I think, in these sort of cases. So I talk about them. But to think that every Muslim, or I know some Muslim lads who would want to do to them the same as what every other man would want to do to them. So, and I meet, on my day-to-day, I meet hostile Muslims, but I also meet a lot of decent Muslims who have a sound chat with me, who say how frustrated they are with what's happening. But most of them, you find, don't follow the doctrine or the scripture of Islam. If they did, then it wouldn't be as... So yeah, my problem, again, just to clear their record, my problem's with Islam, with the teachings. It's not with individual people. In fact, Winston Churchill said individual Muslims can show amazing traits, but it is Islam that will bring them backwards. The rain stopped. If you're watching this, give it a share. There's 4,000 people watching it. If every single one of you shared it, this would reach a lot more people, which means more people would see the faces of these accused child rapists as they come and enter into court. Now, I'm walking a thin line because basically the police put me on this. I'm on a suspended prison sentence, which was supposed to be to prevent me or deter me from reporting on these sort of cases. I think that it's important that people understand just what's going on. When this case was on the other day, there was a couple of Muslim lads in here for terrorism, and guess what? They all went and sat together, of course, and shook hands and had a friendly chat. And you saw, which I've seen at every case. You know, when I've been to the cases at each court and I've been into the court, if there was 10 alleged white paedophiles or non-Muslim paedophiles, and they were sat there, would the non-Muslims in that court be going up, shaking their hands and talking to them? Would they? No, they wouldn't. But the opposite plays a part in this court, in these sort of cases. How you doing, you all right? I'm not bad, thank you. That, I'd say, I guess there's there. I guess that's their solicitor. And what you also find in most of these cases, in fact all of them, that the Muslims who are facing charges use Muslim lawyers every time. In fact, on this actual case, when I first turned up at Huddersfield Magistrates Court, you may remember, if you watch the videos, the Muslim lawyer, the female Muslim lawyer, come out and said, just go away, go away. She started getting very angry with me as well. And she said, what is it to do with you? She said, so what? I said, they've been raping children. They're alleged to have raped children. She said, so what? So what? So what? Oh, of course, so what? Because they're not Muslim children, are they? Easy? Of course you can.
No, I don't want to be put on there.
You don't want to be on there?
No, but I'll have a selfie with you.
Go on then.
How can I have a selfie?
Go on then, go on then. No, it's not. It's facing that way, look.
Pocket.
Go on then, there you go. Hold on, 1 minute. See you later. We love that.
It's really cute.
Oh, mate. How you doing, mate? You alright? Yeah, of course you can, yeah. No worries.
Good to meet you.
Ah, nice one. Thanks.
Watch your videos.
Cheers. Oh, here you go, system. 1 sec, mate. No, it's not. Yeah, go on, mate. Yeah, I am, yeah.
I'm guessing it'll be on.
Yeah, that's it. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
I'm guessing it'll be on Facebook.
It will be, yeah.
You're live chatting now.
It's live now, yeah. You don't want to be on there, do you? Hold on. All right, mate. They're in at 10. What's the time, lads?